The sirens were the first thing I heard. Shrill, trapped, wrong. They weren't moving. I crested the last hill toward Raven's Path and slammed my boot on the brake. There it was, an 8-foot wall of steel, where my family's road should have been. A brand new fence. Welded plates still blue from heat. Padlocked chain thick as a wrist. On the other side, an ambulance idled in a fog of diesel and panic, while a young mother beat her palms against the windshield and screamed my wife's name. Emily's clinic is half a mile down this road, I said to the woman in the ambulance doorway, who wore a HOA badge like a sheriff's star. Open it. Meredith Kincaid didn't blink. Perfect hair, perfect jaw, perfect cruelty. This access is for Cedar Hollow residents only, she recited, crisp as a courtroom transcript. No permit, no entry. Her son's throat is closing. The EMT snapped, lifting a tiny boy whose lips were turning the color of winter plums. Nearest epinephrine is at Dr. Carver's. We don't have time for the state highway loop. Meredith glanced at her clipboard the way a priest glances at scripture. Rules are rules. Something hot and old flared in my chest, the same burn I'd felt when my father handed me the keys to this land and said, "Don't you ever let anyone fence in what your grandfather opened." In 1958, he'd carved Raven's Path through rock with a borrowed dozer and stubborn prayers. An easement recorded in ink and blood tied it to our name forever. I could hear his gravel laugh in the wind. Measure twice, cut once. But when a child can't breathe, you don't measure. You cut. I jumped from my truck and grabbed the bolt cutters behind the seat. 2 uniformed guards stepped forward like trained dogs. "Touch that fence and you're going to jail," one said. His voice shook, mine didn't. "Film everything." I told the EMT, names, faces, the exact time this child was blocked. The mother looked at me with eyes like a drowning person seeing rope. "Please." Meredith slid between me and the chain, smile thin as a razor. "Mr. Carver, your agricultural traffic has been incompatible with our community standards for months. This barrier is a safety upgrade. You may apply for an access permit 72 hours in advance." I took one step closer so she could smell the sweat and cedar dust baked into my shirt. "Lady, you built a cage on my family's artery and called it safety." The guard tapped a taser against his palm. I didn't look away. Behind us, the siren hiccuped, then died to a weak, awful whine. The boy made a noise that didn't sound like a human noise at all. Emily's voice crackled through my phone on speaker. "Liam, where are they?" "Stuck at the new wall." I said, "They need epinephrine." "I've got it ready," she said. "But if they go around the long way, that's 40 minutes. He doesn't have 40 minutes. Of course he didn't. Meredith knew that too. She'd known it when she ordered this fence welded in the night, just like she'd known it when she fined the retired school janitor down the road because his hand-built chicken coop was aesthetic blight, and when she threatened the widow in Lot 12 with liens for overdue landscape harmony. Power always looks for something softer to press its thumb into. Today, it found a child. I swung the cutters up. Metal rang in the morning like a church bell. "Sheriff is en route." Meredith announced to no one. "You will be charged with felony destruction of property." "This is my property," I said, and bit into the chain. The first cut bit back tempered steel, new and proud. Sparks jumped. The boy's mother sobbed. I leaned my weight and felt something give. "Stop," Meredith barked, finally losing that lawyerly composure. "This is Cedar-approved infrastructure." The board voted. "The board doesn't outrank an easement," I said, and thought of the paper in our safe with my grandfather's signature steady as fence post grain. Thought of the winter he sold his best heifer to pay the surveyor because the county clerk said, "If you want it to last, put it in writing." He did. We do. A truck door slammed behind me. I didn't turn. The chain was nearly through. "Mr. Carver," another voice called. Male official. Practiced calm. Put the tool down. "Do you have bolt cutters?" I asked without looking. "Put it down," he repeated. "If that boy stops breathing while we discuss permitting, You explain it to his mother. I bit the last strand, and the chain fell like a shot snake. The padlock thumped the dirt. A cheer rose in my throat that I swallowed because this wasn't victory. This was triage. I reached for the latch and the gate didn't move. Welded tabs. Meredith had thought of that too. She smiled again, something reptilian lighting her eyes. You cut a chain. The gate remains. Back up. I told the EMT. I'm ramming it. I ran for my truck, but the guard stepped in front of the hood, lifting a hand like he could stop 6,000 pounds of Ford with his palm. He couldn't. The other guard drew the taser. The boy wheezed. The mother screamed my wife's name again. My phone buzzed with Emily's second call. In the distance, a siren wound closer. Or maybe it was the same one strangling in place. Mr. Carver. The official voice was closer now. Boots on gravel. Drop your keys and step away from the vehicle. I put the key in the ignition. Liam, don't. Emily's voice pleaded through the speaker. Think. There's another way. The engine roared. The guard didn't move. Meredith lifted her phone, already framing her victory. I shifted into drive, pointed 2 tons of rust and resolve at a wall that should never have been born, and heard the unmistakable click of a safety being switched off, right behind my left ear. The metallic click behind my ear froze me harder than Montana winter. It wasn't the sound of an idle threat. It was the sound of someone ready to enforce one. Out of the truck. Mr. Carver. The voice said calm, steady, with just enough menace to make my skin crawl. I turned slowly. Hands where they could see. The man holding the pistol wasn't in uniform. No badge, no name tag, just a black ball cap and mirrored sunglasses that reflected my own face back at me. Jaw set, eyes hot. Private security. Meredith called over the fence like she was announcing a guest speaker at a garden club meeting, contracted to enforce HOA safety measures. You're trespassing. I barked a laugh that had no humor in it. On my own road, on Cedar Hollow property, she corrected, her tone a teacher scolding a slow student. Raven's Path is officially designated as subdivision access under the new improvement plan. That plan isn't worth the paper it's printed on, I shot back. Easement's older than your manicure. Meredith, the EMT shouted from the other side of the fence. We're losing him. The boy's tiny frame jerked with shallow, panicked breaths. His mother's screams had gone hoarse. I stepped toward the fence. The barrel tracked me. Back up, ball cap ordered. You're done here. Then Emily's voice blared from my phone again, loud enough for everyone to hear. Liam, Sheriff Patterson's on the way. He knows the easement law. Hold on. Meredith's smirk faltered for the first time. Sheriff's got no jurisdiction over HOA property disputes, she said. But there was a hitch in her delivery. Property disputes don't involve children dying on the wrong side of your fence, I said. That's criminal negligence. Her jaw tightened, but before she could respond, the sound of tires crunching gravel cut through the tension. A dust cloud rose from the bend in the road. 2 trucks, both county marked. Sheriff Patterson stepped out first, broad-shouldered, Stetson shadowing a face carved from 40 years of Montana law. What in the hell is going on here? He barked. Meredith marched forward like she owned him, clipboard in hand. Sheriff, this man is destroying HOA property, and Sheriff the EMT shouted, desperation breaking his voice. Kids in anaphylaxis. We need through now. Patterson's head snapped toward the ambulance, then to me, then to the fence. Who built this? I did, Meredith said, chin high, voted in by the Board for Community Safety. He walked to the gate, ran a hand over the welded tabs, and let out a low whistle. Ma'am, you realize this is blocking an established agricultural easement recorded with the county since 1958. Her lips pressed together. And you realize, he continued, that blocking emergency medical transport is a felony in this state. That's a matter of interpretation, she said. No, ma'am, he replied. That's a matter of law. He turned to Ballcap. Holster that weapon before I arrest you for brandishing. Ballcap hesitated. Patterson's deputy had his own hand resting on a holstered sidearm, stance casual but ready. Ballcap lowered his weapon, muttering something about just following orders. The sheriff pulled a set of heavy bolt cutters from his truck, handed them to me. "Make it quick, Liam." I didn't hesitate. The tab snapped, the gate swung wide, and the ambulance roared through in a blur of red and white. The boy's mother mouthed thank you through the glass before they vanished down the road toward Emily's clinic. The crowd that had gathered at the edges of the scene, a mix of Cedar Hollow residents, ranchers from up the valley, and curious onlookers, started murmuring. Some looked furious, others embarrassed. Meredith straightened her shoulders. "This isn't over, Carver. The board will." "You're damn right it isn't over," I cut in. "But next time, we're having this conversation in court, not at the gates of my land." She tried to retort, but Patterson's voice rolled over hers. "Ma'am, I'm issuing an immediate order to remove this obstruction pending legal review. You've got 48 hours. Her eyes narrowed, venom behind the veneer. "Enjoy your little victory. Liam, I've been in bigger fights than this, and I don't lose." I stepped closer until only the fence post was between us. "Then you've never fought someone who's got more to lose than you can possibly take." The wind shifted, carrying the sound of the ambulance siren fading into the distance. For the first time since I'd driven up that hill, I could breathe again, but the look Meredith shot me over her clipboard was pure promise this was only round one. And I knew, standing there in the dust and diesel stink, that she had no intention of fighting fair. By the time I got back to the ranch that evening, the sun was bleeding out over the ridgeline, turning the cottonwoods black against a fire-orange sky. Emily met me on the porch, still in her scrubs, the knees dust-streaked from kneeling beside that little boy's gurney. "He's going to be fine," she said before I could ask. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled when she reached for mine. Another 10 minutes and it would have been a different story. I squeezed her fingers. "Meredith got her first win in the Court of Chaos today," I said. "But she won't like what's coming next." Emily's eyes narrowed in a way that told me she was already several moves ahead. Then we start pulling every nail out of her fence, metaphorically and legally. We sat down at the kitchen table with coffee and the old metal box we kept for anything important deeds, birth certificates, the easement papers my grandfather had signed in '58. I laid the parchment on the table like a card in a high-stakes game. The ink was faded, but the wording was as clear as the day it was written: perpetual right of ingress and egress for agricultural purposes. No HOA, no development board, no overpaid attorney could change that without my consent. "She's hoping you'll react like a hothead and make mistakes she can use," Emily said, flipping through the other documents. "But if we're patient, we'll bleed her case dry." Patience wasn't my strong suit. But I knew Emily was right. Meredith wasn't just aiming for my road. She wanted the whole ranch. And she'd proven this morning she was willing to risk lives to get it. I spent the next 2 days fielding calls. Neighbors who'd watched the scene at the fence. Parents from town whose kids played baseball with the boy Meredith had delayed. Even old Walt Jackson from the feed store, who'd never had a kind word for anyone, told me, "You've got half the county behind you now, Carver. Don't waste it." Support was one thing. Proof was another. So I called Garrett Hale, my oldest friend and the sharpest property lawyer within 3 counties. He still owed me for hauling him out of a snowbank junior year. He owed me more now. "I heard about the stunt she pulled," Garrett said when he answered. "Got a copy of your easement original and 2 notarized duplicates." "Good. And Liam start documenting everything. Dates, times, witnesses. Every dirty trick she pulls is another nail in her legal coffin." By the 4th day, the fence was still standing. The sheriff's 48-hour order had come and gone, and Meredith had used the delay to rally her HOA faithful. The rumor mill was working overtime. Carver's Road is dangerous for children. His cattle spread disease. His logging trucks are damaging the subdivision's property values. That Saturday, I drove into town for supplies. Murphy's Hardware was half full, and as soon as I stepped inside, Conversations hushed. Folks looked away or nodded in solidarity, depending on which side of the line they stood. At the counter, Bill Murphy leaned in and whispered, "She was here yesterday. Bought another padlock. Said you'd be seeing it soon." When I got back to the ranch, I found out what he meant. Meredith hadn't removed the fence. She'd reinforced it. New locks, heavier chain, fresh no trespassing, HOA property signs bolted every 6 feet. And this time, 2 private security SUVs idled nearby like guard dogs, their drivers watching the road with mirrored shades and folded arms. I could feel the heat rising in my chest again, but Emily's voice echoed in my head. Don't give her an easy win. Instead, I walked up to the nearest SUV, phone in hand, recording. Mind telling me who's paying you to guard stolen property? The driver didn't answer. He just rolled up the window. That night, Emily and I started a new file video clips, still photos, timestamps. Each one a bead on a string we were going to wrap tight around Meredith's neck in court. But as I backed the footage up to the cloud, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered, and a woman's voice I didn't recognize said, "Mr. Carver. You don't know me, but I used to live in Cedar Hollow. Meredith ruined my family. If you want to bring her down, I have something you need to see." Before I could ask her name, she hung up. Emily looked at me over the laptop screen. "You think it's real?" I thought of the steel in that woman's voice and the way it trembled at the edges. "I think," I said slowly. "We're about to find out just how many enemies Meredith's made." The call didn't feel like help. It felt like a confession. I slept with my boots by the door and the trail cam feed glowing on my phone. And at first light, I drove to the truck stop diner off Highway 2, where the coffee is black as crankcase oil and nobody asks questions if you sit facing the door. She was already there, mid-30s, hair scraped into a knot that said sleep was optional and survival wasn't. She kept her purse zipped and her back to the wall. "Nora Pike," she said, barely above the clatter of forks. "We lived in Cedar Hollow 2 years. We don't anymore." I took the seat opposite. The waitress poured and retreated like she knew a storm when she saw one. "What did Meredith do to your family?" I asked. Nora's laugh was a brittle thing. "It's not what, it's how. She doesn't just win, she removes." She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside photocopied minutes, screenshots of email threads, ledger entries with tidy numbers and messy truths. "Meredith calls it the compliance ladder," Nora said. "Start with fines grass length, fence color, a garden gnome that's not on the approved aesthetic list. Then come emergency safety inspections. They show up with clipboards and a locksmith. If you argue, you're hostile to safety. If you comply, they discover violations." And then I asked, though I knew, then the letters start. From a partner bank, from a preferred attorney. You get an offer to refinance or relocation assistance if you sign a non-disclosure. If you don't, the board votes nuisance abatement and files a lien. Her hands shook. She flattened them on the paper to still them. "We had a son with asthma. Meredith refused to approve a fence that would have blocked dust from the construction site. Said it disrupted sightlines. He ended up in the ER twice. We missed 3 board meetings, and by the 4th there were late fees and legal fees and a notice that our landscaping endangered community cohesion. We sold before the sheriff sold it for us." I looked at the emails. One subject line snagged me like barbed wire Raven's Path control window. Inside, a message from M. Kincaidi Cedar Hollow Essex org to the board. "If we limit access 0700, 0900, and 1600, 1800, we create leverage. Label as noise mitigation and deny all exceptions by default. Approvals on a case-by-case basis only. Medical exceptions become magnets if we allow the first one." I felt my jaw go tight. She wrote this before the ambulance. 2 weeks before, Nora said, "Here." Another email, this one with a spreadsheet attached, a column titled Targets. A widow in Lot 12, Mr. Reeves, the retired janitor. A line I didn't expect. Carver veterinary amortized nuisance. Phase out by Q3. Cold slid under my ribs. I pictured Emily kneeling beside that boy's gurney. Steady hands and tired eyes. I pictured Meredith's smile when the siren choked at her gate. "How did you get this?" I asked. Nora's gaze flicked to the door, then back. I served on the Architectural Review Committee for 6 months. Meredith needed someone good with details. I thought it meant paint chips and porch lights. It meant file cabinets. It meant seeing contracts routed to her brother-in-law's security firm and her cousin's fence company. It meant watching her edit minutes after the meetings. She slid a thumb drive across the Formica, board cloud login, emails, vendor invoices, a draft agenda she never posted. I glanced at the first page of that draft and swallowed. Emergency special session petition to abandon agricultural easement. Raven's Path. Notice 12 hours. Illegal. Calculated. What made you flip? I asked. Lot 23. Nora said. Her voice went flat, like she'd put the emotion away so she could carry the story. Mrs. Hargrove. Widowed. Fixed income. Meredith denied her request for a ramp after hip surgery, said it violated front elevation harmony, when a volunteer built one anyway. Meredith fined her daily until she signed relocation assistance. She died in a rental 2 towns over, trying to pay movers. I told the board what we were becoming. Meredith smiled and said, "Thank you for your service." And I was off the committee by sunset. I remembered my grandfather's hands scarred, stubborn, gentle with calves and rough with cedar posts. "Don't let bullies set the price of your dignity, kid. They'll always ask for more." I called Garrett from the parking lot. "We've got internal emails and a board login," I said. "Proof of pre-planned road closures, conflicts of interest, a pending attempt to abandon the easement with a legal notice." "Chain of custody," he said immediately. "Copy everything, hash the files, screenshot metadata, and Liam, keep Nora safe. She's a witness now." When I hung up, Nora was staring past me, out the window, chewing the edge of her thumbnail. "You should know," she said. "The security guys Meredith's brother-in-law hired them because they don't mind. Pressure. They followed my kid to school the week we moved. I filed police reports. Nothing stuck. Nothing sticks until it does," I said. "And it's going to—" Back at the ranch, Emily had the dining table laid out like an evidence locker. We cloned the drive twice, printed the worst of the emails, and Emily, methodical as surgery, logged time, date, file paths. The trail cam feed purred on my phone, squares of night and gravel updating every few seconds. At 7:43 p.m., an alert punched my screen. Motion Raven's Path gate. I tapped the thumbnail. Headlights. A flatbed backing in at an angle I knew too well from hauling fence posts. I opened the live view. 4 men in vests, a pallet of concrete bollards, a hammer drill whining as dust plumed from my family's road, a clipboard with a work order stamped Cedar Hollow HOA Emergency Safety Retrofit. At the bottom, a scrawl I recognized instantly because it was mine. Signature L. Carver. My lungs forgot the part where air goes in. Emily leaned over my shoulder and sucked in a breath. "They forged your name." I was already moving for the door when my phone buzzed again. A second alert, not from the road, from the clinic. Another flatbed. Another crew. A string of orange barrels marching across our driveway like an invading army. And then the sheriff called. "Liam," Patterson said, voice clipped, urgent. "They just posted an emergency session for 9 a.m. tomorrow to abandon your easement. Illegal notice or not, they'll try to ram it through. Also, my deputy just flagged a permit for temporary medical access limitation at Emily's clinic." Someone's moving fast. I was halfway to the truck, boots slamming wood, when Nora's text chimed. "Check page 3 of the agenda. They're not just closing Raven's Path. They're voting to declare your ranch a non-conforming use." I hit the porch steps at a run and stopped dead because a black SUV I didn't own rolled to a silent stop at my gate. and Meredith Kincaid stepped out with a smile that said she'd learned to enjoy the taste of other people's fear. Meredith didn't knock. She never did. She just leaned on my gate like it was hers, flanked by two men in tactical vests whose expressions said they'd been paid to enjoy trouble. Evening. Carver, she called, voice warm as ice water. I thought we could have a civil conversation before tomorrow's vote. Civil isn't your style, I said, stepping down the porch steps. And you're trespassing. She tilted her head, feigning confusion. Gates County easement. I'm allowed here. Then she held up a folder like she was showing me a magic trick. This is tomorrow's agenda. I thought you might want to see what's about to become law. I didn't reach for it. Nora already sent me a copy. Something in her smile tightened. Then you know the non-conforming use declaration will make your ranch operations illegal within the subdivision's jurisdiction. Once that passes, you'll have 60 days to cease or relocate. You mean 60 days to sell to your developer friend, I said. What's the finder's fee this time? Meredith, 75 grand, a new BMW. One of her guards shifted, like he wanted to step between us. She waved him off, eyes never leaving mine. You can end this the easy way. Sign the easement abandonment voluntarily, and I'll make sure the board approves a variance to let Emily's clinic operate out of a leased space in town. No loss of income. No more unpleasant scenes. It was bait dipped in poison. Emily's clinic wasn't just her job. It was part of this land. She treated working dogs, ranch horses, the kind of patients suburban vet offices wouldn't touch. Moving it to town would gut half her client base. You think threatening my wife's livelihood will make me fold? I asked. Her tone softened, which somehow made it worse. I think you care more about her than you do about gravel and cows. I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint smear of lipstick on her teeth. You're right about one thing I care about her more than anything. That's why you'll never get a square inch of this land. Because the moment I give you ground, you'll come for her again. Meredith's eyes flickered just a flash, but it was enough. She straightened, snapped the folder shut. You've made your choice. We'll see how the county feels about your perpetual easement when the vote's unanimous tomorrow. She turned, the gravel crunching under her heels, and the SUV door shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Emily came down the steps behind me. She's escalating. I nodded. And tomorrow she's going to find out she's not the only one who knows how to play to a crowd. At 8, Garrett rolled into the yard in his dusty Silverado, 2 cardboard boxes in the bed, exhibits. A through Z, he said, grinning like a man about to pull the tablecloth out from under a full set of china. We spent an hour sorting them Nora's emails, photos of the fence blocking the ambulance, affidavits from witnesses, the forged work order with my signature. Emily had even printed the pediatric ER report for the little boy Meredith delayed. By 9:00, we were in front of the Cedar Hollow clubhouse. Meredith's SUV was parked at the curb, her guards posted like sentries, residents clustered on the lawn, some curious, some hostile, all here for the show. Inside, the board table was set like a tribunal. Meredith sat in the center, gavel in hand, flanked by 4 board members. She called the meeting to order with a sweet, "Good morning." Neighbors. The first item was the non-conforming use vote. She launched into her pitch, painting the ranch as an industrial operation incompatible with residential harmony. She glossed over the easement entirely. When she called for public comment, I stood, Garrett followed, arms full of evidence. My name's Liam Carver, I began, and I'm the owner of the property this board is trying to erase. I held up the easement document, recorded in 1958, perpetual, non-revocable without my consent. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Meredith tapped her gavel. Mr. Carver, this is not the forum I cut her off. It's exactly the forum. You've been using this HOA to target families, fine them into foreclosure, and hand their property to your friends. You blocked an ambulance carrying a child in respiratory arrest. You forged my signature on a work order. And thanks to a former board member, I have every email to prove it. Garrett began distributing copies to the crowd. Phones came out, snapping photos. A reporter from the county paper started scribbling. Meredith's composure cracked. These are taken out of context. The context, I said, is that you knew you couldn't kill this easement legally, so you tried to bleed us until we surrendered, but you miscalculated. We don't surrender. Her guard shifted toward me, but half the room was filming now. She couldn't afford the optics. Then, from the back, a voice I didn't expect. She did the same to me. An older man stepped forward, Mr. Reeves, the retired janitor from Nora's list. Fined me into selling. Told the new buyer she'd clear the riffraff. One by one, others joined in. The widow from Lot 12's niece, a couple who'd been billed for landscape disharmony because their child's swing set was blue instead of brown. Each story piled weight onto the scale. Meredith tried to gavel it down, but the room had turned. And then Garrett played his ace, reading aloud the email about limiting medical exceptions to create leverage. The gasp from the crowd was the sound of something breaking, her power, her shield, and in her eyes. I saw something else break too, the realization that this wasn't just a vote anymore. It was a reckoning. Meredith's knuckles whitened around the gavel. She banged it twice, but the noise barely registered over the swell of voices in the room. This meeting is adjourned, she snapped. No, I said, stepping forward. This meeting is just getting started. Garrett slid a thick envelope onto the table in front of her. For the record, my client is serving you with a formal cease and desist and a notice of intent to pursue civil action for easement interference, fraud, and willful endangerment. The flash of fear that crossed her face was brief, but it was there. Her gaze darted to the other board members. Two of them suddenly found the tabletop very interesting. The other two looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I will not dignify this circus, Meredith said. Board motioned to close the session. Before anyone could raise a hand, Nora stood from her seat in the back and walked to the front with a small black recorder in her palm. Before you do that, she said, pressing play. Meredith's voice filled the room clear, cold, calculating. If we make an example of Carver, the others will fall in line. No exceptions, even for emergencies. Let one ambulance through and every whiner in the valley will have a medical necessity. The recording ended. Silence hit like a hammer. Then the murmur started low. Dangerous. Even the residents who'd been neutral shifted in their seats. Where did you get that? Meredith demanded. I was on your committee. Remember, Nora said. You forgot to erase the drafts in the shared folder. Phones were up now, recording every word, every twitch of her jaw. Meredith glanced at her guards, but even they seemed reluctant to move in a room this volatile. Garrett pounced. We've also filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's office regarding misuse of HOA funds and conflicts of interest in contract awards. Vendor invoices and familial connections are all documented. This board's decisions are tainted by your personal gain. Ms. Kincaid. She started, but the door at the back opened and Sheriff Patterson stepped in, hat in hand. Deputy behind him. Morning, he said, voice mild. Heard there might be some items of legal interest being discussed. Meredith's smile tried to reassemble itself. Sheriff, this is a private meeting, not when it involves a criminal investigation. He interrupted. We have questions about forged work orders and obstruction of emergency services. We'll be speaking to the board members individually. The room erupted. Residents pressed forward, shouting questions, some demanding Meredith's resignation on the spot. She banged the gavel again, but her voice was swallowed by the chaos. Emily moved to my side, her hand slipping into mine. You've turned the tide, she murmured. I wasn't so sure yet. Cornered animals fight hardest. By the time the meeting dissolved into clusters of furious conversation, Garrett and I had collected every scrap of paper and digital file we'd handed out. The sheriff left with a banker's box full of evidence, and Meredith stormed out to her SUV without another word. "Think she'll back off now?" Emily asked as we walked to the truck. I shook my head. "She's not the backing off type. She'll look for another angle." As if to prove me right, my phone buzzed before we'd even left the parking lot. "Unknown number." I answered. "You think today was clever?" Meredith's voice was low, vibrating with fury. "You've just made yourself a very long list of enemies. Already had one. You just made it public," I said, and hung up. Garrett leaned over from the passenger seat. "She's bleeding support. Don't underestimate how dangerous that makes her." Haralikaksirikim that night. The ranch was quiet in the way a forest gets quiet before a storm. Emily was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for soup, when my trail cam app pinged. Motion at Raven's Path. I pulled up the feed. A pickup I didn't recognize eased up to the fence line. Two figures got out, their faces hidden under hoods. One held a gas can. The other had something long and metallic, maybe a crowbar. They moved to the gate and began splashing liquid across the posts. "Emily," I called, already grabbing my boots. "Call Patterson. Now." By the time I reached the truck, one of the figures struck a match. The flare lit their face for a split second, enough for my stomach to drop. It wasn't Meredith. It was one of her guards. And beside him, looking jittery and too young for this game, was a kid I recognized from town, barely out of high school, and about to make the worst mistake of his life. The match hovered over the wood. I floored it down the drive, headlights spearing through the dark, horn blaring. The kid looked up, startled, the flame flickering in his hand. The guard shoved him toward the truck, but the kid hesitated just long enough for me to see a different kind of fear in his eyes. The kind that says I didn't sign up for this. And then the match went out. The guard yanked the kid toward the pickup, barking something I couldn't hear over the growl of my engine. Gravel spat from under my tires as I skidded to a stop, headlights locking them in a cone of white. "Stay where you are," I shouted, door already swinging open. The guard stepped in front of the kid like a body shield, one hand raised, the other still clutching the gas can. "Back off. Carver. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when you bring fire to my gate," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "That's arson, and if you think the sheriff won't be here in 5 minutes, you're dumber than that can is heavy." The kid's eyes darted to me, wide and unfocused, then to the trail camera blinking red in the shadows. He swallowed hard. I didn't know." "Shut up," the guard snapped, but that was his mistake. The kid flinched away from him, guilt written all over his face. Emily's voice rang from behind me, sharp and commanding. "Liam Patterson's on his way." She was standing on the porch with her phone still to her ear. The kitchen light threw her shadow long across the yard, like she was part of the land itself. The guard swore under his breath and tried to drag the kid back to the pickup. I took 2 steps forward, not breaking eye contact. "Leave the kid in the can," I said, "and maybe the sheriff believes you were just lost." His jaw tightened. "You think this is the first time I've—" The sound of tires on gravel cut him off. 2 sets of headlights arced down the road. Sheriff Patterson's cruiser in the lead, his deputy's truck right behind. The guard froze, then shoved the gas can into the kid's hands and hissed something I couldn't catch. The kid just stood there, trembling. Patterson was out of his cruiser before it stopped rolling. "Put it down," he ordered. The kid dropped the can like it burned. Gas splattered his boots. The deputy cuffed the guard without ceremony. Patterson looked at the kid. "You've got 2 choices, tell me who sent you, or I write you up for attempted arson, conspiracy, and whatever else fits." The kid's voice cracked. It was Meredith. Said it was a preventive measure that if the gate burned, you'd have to build a new one under HOA rules, and then she could review the design. She said the insurance would cover it. Patterson's eyes narrowed. "Get in the truck," he told him. "You'll be safer there." The guard didn't say a word. but the look he threw me as the deputy led him away was pure warning. This wasn't over. Why I inside? Emily poured coffee like it was ammunition. She's going from dirty politics to criminal acts, she said, sliding a mug toward me. That was escalation. It's also desperation, I said. She knows she's losing the narrative after the meeting. She's trying to provoke me into making a mistake. Emily leaned on the counter, eyes steady on mine. So we don't give her that mistake. We give her proof. We spent the next hour pulling footage from the trail cams, backing it up to 3 different drives. Patterson came back in, hat in hand, to tell us both suspects were being booked. The kid's scared, he said. He's willing to make a statement, but he's also worried about retaliation. We can protect him, Emily said without hesitation. He can help us connect her to the order. Patterson nodded. And I'm going to start drafting a warrant for her phone and email records. That got my attention. You think a judge will sign off? After tonight, he said. I'd bet my badge. The next morning, the frost on Raven's Path glistened under a hard blue sky. But the peace didn't last. Around 9 Decius, a line of SUVs rolled up, each one with Cedar Hollow decals. Meredith wasn't in the lead car she was in, the one that stopped right in front of my gate. She stepped out like nothing had happened the night before, in a cream coat and oversized sunglasses. Mr. Carver, she said sweetly. I'm here to notify you that the board has voted to commence enforcement of subdivision safety standards, effective immediately. You mean harassment, I said. Her smile was all teeth. Call it what you want. My inspectors will be on your property within the hour. Behind her. 4 men with clipboards and measuring tapes were already unloading from the SUVs. Patterson's words from last night echoed in my head. Don't give her the mistake she wants. So instead of grabbing my own bolt cutters, I reached for my phone, angled it just right, and started recording. Fine, I said. But every step they take on this land is going into the record. And when this is over, Meredith, it's not my gate that'll be gone, it's yours. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but I could hear the flicker in her voice. We'll see. And as her inspectors walked past the threshold of Raven's Path, I knew we'd just crossed another line one she couldn't uncross. The first inspector through the gate was a heavy-set man in a reflective vest with HOA safety stamped across the back. He didn't look at me as he unrolled a measuring tape across the gravel. The others fanned out, one photographing my fence line, another jotting notes about my barn, a fourth circling the stock pond like he was scouting for buried treasure. Emily stood beside me on the porch, arms crossed tight. They have no jurisdiction here, she said under her breath. I know, I replied, keeping my voice level for the camera I still held. But we need them to prove it on video. The heavy-set one knelt to measure the gap under my front gate, muttering something about livestock containment violations. He was standing on my land, under my easement, pretending HOA rules applied. Perfect. From the corner of my eye, I caught Meredith lingering by her SUV, phone pressed to her ear. Her lips were moving fast, but she kept glancing at me. The satisfaction on her face made my skin itch. One of the inspectors headed toward Emily's clinic. Hey, I called. You don't have permission to enter that building. He didn't even slow down. We're authorized, he said without turning. Subdivision safety review. Emily moved before I could stop her, intercepting him at the door. This is a veterinary medical facility, state licensed. Any inspection requires 48 hours notice and must be conducted by the Department of Veterinary Medicine. You step 1 foot inside, and I will have you arrested for unlawful entry. He hesitated, glancing back at Meredith, who gave a tiny shake of her head. He retreated without another word. I filed that away. Meredith knew the line and didn't want to cross it in front of my camera. That meant there were still limits, she feared. Good. By the time Patterson arrived, the inspectors had logged a dozen violations, most of them laughable barn roof color incompatible with community standards, Unapproved agricultural equipment visible from roadway. Stock pond fencing insufficient for child safety. The sheriff walked straight past Meredith and into the cluster of inspectors. Gentlemen, unless you have a court order granting you access, you're trespassing. This is private property under an agricultural easement. The heavyset man puffed up. We have board authorization. And I have state law, Patterson said, producing a folded copy from his breast pocket. HOA authority ends at the subdivision boundary unless expressly granted by the property owner. Mr. Carver hasn't granted it. The inspectors exchanged uneasy looks. Meredith's voice sliced through the air. Sheriff, we're acting in the best interest of community safety. You blocked an ambulance last week, Patterson said, not raising his voice but cutting her off like a blade. You want to talk safety? Let's start there. Murmurs rippled through the crowd that had gathered along the road. Neighbors, ranchers, even a few Cedar Hollow residents who'd wandered over. Phones were everywhere, capturing every exchange. Patterson turned to me. Do you want to press charges for trespass? I looked straight at Meredith. Not yet. Let them finish writing their little report. Every false claim they put down will be one more count in court. Her jaw twitched. She signaled the inspectors, and they began packing up, deliberately slow, trying to look unbothered, but the set of their shoulders told another story. Once they were gone, Patterson lingered. We got the warrant, he said quietly. We'll be pulling her phone and email records within the week. That'll tie her to the arson attempt, I said, and maybe more. He replied, The kid from last night mentioned other jobs. Said Meredith has a special projects list? Emily frowned. Special projects. Patterson's eyes hardened. People she wants gone. Properties she wants brought into compliance. He said your name's at the top. That night, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table. The day's footage loaded onto the laptop. Frame by frame, we logged each inspector's actions, each bogus violation. At 11:17 a.m., the camera caught Meredith herself crossing the property line for exactly 6 seconds to supervise the barn inspection. 6 seconds was all we needed. Clear trespass. On tape. Garrett's going to love this, I said. Emily didn't smile. She's not slowing down. Every time we push her back, she finds another way to come at us. Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a notification from the trail cam's motion at the north pasture. I clicked the feed and froze. 2 men, not the same as before, were kneeling by the irrigation lines. One held a tool, the other was watching the road. They're cutting the water, I said, shoving back from the table. Emily grabbed her coat. Not tonight, they're not. We were halfway to the truck when a third figure stepped into the camera's frame. A woman, bundled in a dark coat, her face hidden. She pointed toward the barn, and the 2 men stood, tools in hand. Emily stopped dead. Liam, that's her. Meredith Kincaid, on my pasture in the dead of night. The sight of Meredith on my land lit a fuse in my gut. She wasn't hiding behind her SUV this time or sending hired hands. She was here, boots on my pasture, like she owned the place. Emily's breath steamed in the cold as she gripped my arm. Call Patterson first. If we go out there hot, she'll twist it into harassment. She was right, but the image of her pointing toward my barn while those 2 men hefted tools made my pulse pound. I hit Patterson's number on speed dial. He answered on the first ring. Carver. She's here, I said. North pasture. 2 guys with her. Looks like they're about to cut the irrigation and maybe more. Stay put, he ordered. Deputy and I are 10 minutes out. Cameras rolling every angle, I said, and I'm sending you the live feed now. From the truck, we watched through the glow of my phone screen. Meredith walked the men along the irrigation line, stopping every few feet to point. The taller one knelt and worked at the pipe with a wrench. Water wouldn't just stop at the troughs if they cut that it would drain the storage tanks, leaving my herd dry by morning. Emily clenched her fists. If they get that line open tonight, Half our cattle will be in stress by sunrise. I kept my eyes on the feed. They won't get the chance. The shorter man broke off from the group, heading toward the barn. He carried something under his arm, a small black box with wires dangling. My stomach went cold. That wasn't plumbing gear. He's planting something, I said. Emily leaned closer to the screen. That's not just a tool bag. Liam, that looks like a game camera. Or a tracker. A second later, the man knelt by the barn's side door, fiddling with the latch. I didn't wait for Patterson. I swung out of the truck, flashlight in one hand, my phone in the other, recording as I crossed the yard. Gravel crunched under my boots, loud in the stillness. Meredith heard me first. Her head snapped up, and that practiced smile curved her mouth. Evening. Mr. Carver. Just checking for leaks. Funny, I said, keeping the beam fixed on her face. Since none of you are licensed plumbers, and that guy over there isn't fixing leaks, he's planting equipment on my barn. The taller man straightened, water dripping from his wrench. We're on a safety inspection. I angled my phone toward him. Then you won't mind explaining to the sheriff why your inspection happens in the dark, without notice, on land you have no legal access to. The shorter man froze mid-kneel. Meredith's smile thinned. You're paranoid, Carver. This is a community matter. No, I said. This is trespassing, tampering with agricultural infrastructure. And if that box has any recording capability pointed toward my clinic or home, it's also illegal surveillance. Emily appeared at my shoulder, holding her own phone high so the camera light burned into the scene. Smile, Meredith. You're live streaming to half the county right now. For the first time. Her composure faltered. She turned sharply to the shorter man. Pick it up. We're leaving. Headlights swept across the pasture just as Patterson's cruiser crested the rise. His deputy followed close behind. The men stepped back from the irrigation line, hands visible. Patterson didn't waste time. On the ground, tools down, he barked. The deputy moved in to collect the black box and the wrench. What's in the box? Patterson asked. The deputy opened it under the flashlight. Inside sat a cellular transmitter and a compact camera battery live. Lens aimed just right to capture my barn doors. Wireless feed, the deputy said. Motion activated. Meredith crossed her arms. That's for monitoring community hazards. On private property you don't control, Patterson cut in. And after last week's arson attempt, planting devices here looks a lot like setting up the next one. He turned to me. Do you want to press charges? Yes, I said without hesitation. The deputy cuffed both men while Patterson took Meredith by the arm, not cuffing her yet, but close. You're coming in for questioning. Her voice was sharp now. Brittle. You can't prove I ordered this. Patterson looked at the live stream counter still running on Emily's phone. Pretty sure you just did. By the time they drove away, the pasture was quiet again, save for the hiss of water trickling from the pipe they'd loosened. Emily rested a hand on my arm. She's getting reckless. Good. I said, reckless means sloppy. Sloppy means we end this sooner. Back inside. We downloaded the night's footage to Garrett's secure drive. Every frame, every word, was another nail in Meredith's case. And as I watched the playback of her face under my flashlight, I realized she wasn't just fighting for control of Raven's Path anymore. She was fighting to keep something buried, whatever it was. I intended to dig it up. The next morning broke sharp and brittle, frost silvering every fence post like the land had put on armor. Emily was already at the table, coffee steaming beside her laptop, a stack of printed emails from Garrett spread between her elbows. Patterson called at sunrise, she said without looking up. They pulled a partial data dump from Meredith's phone before her lawyer could stall it. I sat, still in my jacket, and Emily slid a page across to me. It was an email chain between Meredith and someone listed only as KL Holdings. The subject line made my pulse thump. Raven's Path acquisition timeline and leverage points. The body was worse. Bullet points. Cold. Surgical. Phase out. Carver operations via nuisance claims. Leverage safety infractions to block medical facility access. Trigger abandonment of easement. Secure lot for redevelopment. Finalize sale to K.L. Holdings 2.1 Muller projected net. At the bottom, Meredith had typed, "Consider offering relocation stipend to expedite compliance. Ensure media narrative focuses on community progress." Emily tapped another sheet. And this? A text thread from the same number. It was a photo of our barn under a winter moon, time-stamped 2 nights before the arson attempt. The message read, "Visual confirmed. Infrastructure vulnerable. Proceed as discussed." I leaned back, breath clouding in the cold kitchen air. K.L. Holdings is the developer, and whoever's behind it, Emily said, isn't afraid to break laws to get what they want. By mid-morning, Garrett was on speakerphone, pacing wherever he was. "We can tie her directly to the surveillance device now. Between that and the phone records, we've got probable cause for conspiracy charges. But here's the kicker. K.L. Holdings is a shell, registered in Nevada, managed by a trust. The trustee," he paused for effect, "Kevin Langley, Meredith's cousin." Emily's jaw set. "So this has been family business all along." "Exactly," Garrett said. "She's been using the HOA to strip properties, feed them to Langley at below market prices, and pocket the spread." I looked out the window toward Raven's Path. The frost was melting, sunlight burning through, but the road still felt shadowed. "What's our next move?" Garrett's voice hardened. "We hit them on every front. Criminal complaint for the trespass and surveillance, civil suit for interference with the easement, and we drag K.L. Holdings into discovery so their books see daylight." The plan was good, but Meredith wasn't sitting idle. At 2:00 p.m., a certified letter arrived from the HOA. The header was pure theater. Final notice of immediate action required. According to their assessment, our stock pond was a public safety hazard due to potential drowning risk. They demanded it be drained within 14 days, or the board would take corrective action and bill us. Emily held the letter like it smelled bad. "She's trying to strip our water now. That pond's been here longer than her subdivision," I said. "It's on the original agricultural plan, and it's our primary backup during drought." I scanned the fine print. Buried halfway down was a sentence that made my stomach turn. "Non-compliance may result in condemnation procedures to protect community welfare." "Condemnation," I said. "She's laying groundwork to seize the land." Emily's hands curled into fists. "She's not just after Raven's Path anymore. She's after the whole ranch." She returned by evening. The sky was the color of bruised steel, and the wind carried a scent I didn't like: wood smoke, faint but wrong for the season. I grabbed the binoculars from the porch shelf and scanned north toward Cedar Hollow. That's when I saw it: 2 pickup trucks idling near the boundary fence, tailgates down. One had a load of construction debris, plywood sheets, broken pallets, rolls of black plastic. The other held barrels. Not water barrels. I pulled out my phone, zoomed the camera. The stenciled letters on the nearest barrel read, "Flammable." Emily stepped beside me, eyes narrowing. "She's staging something, or covering something up," I said. "Either way, we need eyes on it tonight." At 8:47 p.m., the trail cams pinged motion at the pond. The feed showed 3 figures in waders, dragging a weighted tarp across the surface. The water rippled, black under the moon. One of them bent to hook something onto the dam intake. Emily's hand found my arm. "They're sabotaging it." I hit record, heart pounding. Not just sabotaging. If that intake fails, the overflow floods Raven's Path. She'll spin it as proof we're a danger. Before I could grab my coat, headlights swept up our drive Patterson's cruiser again. He jumped out before the engine died. "We've got a problem," he said, breath clouding. "Deputy just caught wind of an anonymous tip to the county claims your pond is leaking contaminants into the subdivision's water supply. County inspector's on his way here now." And then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Drain it yourself tonight, Carver, or tomorrow I drain it for you." Patterson read the text over my shoulder, his jaw tightening. Anonymous number. I nodded. Burner phone. "Probably." Emily pointed toward the pond on the live feed. "Forget the text, look. They're still down there." Patterson studied the footage. "That's deliberate tampering. If they can cause a spill or flood, they can get the county to shut you down under emergency authority." The deputy's headlights flared over the ridge, bouncing toward the pond. The three figures bolted, tarp sliding off the waders. One of them stumbled, nearly falling into the water before scrambling up the bank and into the trees. The deputy arrived seconds later, breathless. They left equipment bolt cutters, a pry bar, and he held up a sealed container. Not ours. No labels. Emily took a step back. "That's a hazmat canister. We didn't open it. Patterson bagged it, already calling it into the state environmental unit. If there's any trace of contaminant, and we prove they planted it, that's felony environmental fraud." By the time the county inspector rolled in, Patterson had the gear secured and my camera footage cued. The inspector, a wiry man with a clipboard, started with a curt tone, but his face changed after seeing the video. "That's staged," he said flatly. "If I find this was an intentional setup, they're going to wish they'd never heard of a county permit. Check the HOA's own maintenance logs," I told him. "Bet you'll find sudden water quality concerns filed in the last 48 hours. He smirked. "I'll be doing more than checking logs." Like back at the house, Emily poured coffee while Patterson stood at the counter making calls. When he hung up, his eyes had that look the one I'd seen when a rancher's livestock got rustled. "State lab's on standby," he said, "and we're pushing for a warrant to search HOA maintenance storage. That container might match others they've bought." Emily tapped the text still glowing on my phone. "She's not hiding her threats anymore." "That's ego. It's also her trying to speed the clock," I said. "She knows we're closing in." Or an hour later, Garrett called with another hit. Liam. "Langley's Trust isn't just buying Cedar Hollow properties. I found 3 other HOA developments in the state where properties flipped after code enforcement actions, always for cash, always through the same trust." "How many have ties to Meredith?" I asked. "All 3, Garrett said. "Different titles, same signature buried in the filings." I stared out the window at the frost-rimmed yard. "She's running the same playbook statewide." Emily's voice was low. "If we expose that, it's bigger than us. She won't go quietly." "That's fine," I said. "I'm not planning on quiet." The next morning, a fresh envelope sat in the mailbox. No return address, but I didn't need one. Inside was a single photo Emily's clinic sign, spray-painted with the word "shutdown" in dripping red. The message was clear. Meredith was done pretending this was just business. I set the photo on the table between Emily and Patterson. "She wants me rattled before we hit her in court." Patterson slid it back. "Then don't give her what she wants. Let her keep walking into her own trap." I nodded, but my gut knew something else. Meredith wasn't just going to escalate in court. The next move would come where the cameras didn't reach. And that meant I needed eyes everywhere. By sundown, the red spray paint image was burned into my head. Emily tried to keep the clinic running as normal, but every time the doorbell chimed, I caught her shoulders stiffen. I spent the afternoon wiring 2 more trail cams, one aimed at the clinic parking lot, the other hidden in the windbreak by the north pasture. If Meredith wanted to play off camera, she'd have to start digging tunnels. At 9:14 p.m., the north cam pinged. Movement 2 figures, low and fast, cutting across the frost like shadows. One carried a metal case, the other swung a long-handled tool. Emily came up behind me, eyes on the screen. "Same boots as the irrigation crew," she said quietly. You think the feed jolted as one figure planted the tool into the dirt, working in short, violent strokes. The other crouched, fiddling with something at the base of the fence. I was halfway to the door when my phone buzzed with Garrett's name. "Don't go out there yet," he said without preamble. "We've got a court date for the injunction 3 days from now. Let them dig their own grave on film. They might be planting something dangerous." I said. "Then we have both a criminal and civil slam dunk," he replied. "But if you scare them off now, you lose the proof." I hated being right when it felt wrong. I stayed in the dark, watching the camera record every movement. At 9:27 p.m., the shorter figure pulled out a spray can and painted something on the fence, 2 words I couldn't make out until they stepped back and the infrared caught it. "Toxic zone." Emily's breath caught. "They're framing us for contamination." The taller one dropped the tool and pulled out a camera, snapping photos like a tourist on a deadline. Then they gathered their gear and slipped into the tree line. I texted Patterson the clip. "Proof in progress." They left through north fence. His reply came fast. "Deputy en route. Stay inside." The 10 minutes later, flashing lights swept the road. The deputy returned with a long-handled post driver and a partially buried sign, warning unsafe water source, complete with a county seal sticker. Emily held it up under the porch light. "That's not county issued. It's a fake. And it's admissible." I said. "Chain of custody starts now." Brups. The next morning, Meredith switched tactics. Instead of sending people under cover of night, she arrived herself broad daylight, arms crossed, and a film crew in tow, documenting hazardous conditions for the community, she said loudly. Glancing at the camera operator, I stepped out. Phone recording. "You mean the hazardous sign planted here last night, the one with the counterfeit county seal? Funny thing, it's already in sheriff's evidence." Her smile wavered. "Baseless accusation." I held my phone higher. "Not an accusation. A statement of fact. And you're on record now." The camera guy hesitated, then turned his lens toward Meredith. She hissed something under her breath, and the crew packed up faster than they'd arrived. Emily joined me on the porch, voice low enough for only me to hear. "She's losing control of the optics." "Good," I said, "because in 3 days, we make sure she loses everything else." But even as I said it, a knot tightened in my gut. People like Meredith didn't walk into court empty-handed. She had another play lined up, one we hadn't seen yet. And when it came, it wouldn't be on paper. It would be personal. 3 days can be a lifetime when you know someone's coming for you. By the morning of the injunction hearing, I'd run through every possible angle Meredith could use fake witnesses. Doctored evidence. Last-minute emergencies to delay the case. What I didn't expect was for her to hit before I even left the ranch. At 6:42, Emily's clinic alarm shrieked. I was already halfway into my boots when she burst into the kitchen, still pulling on her coat. "They smashed the front window," she said, breathless. Trail cam caught 2 of them faces covered. They went straight for the med fridge. Patterson arrived 10 minutes later, hauling a black evidence box from the back of his cruiser. Inside were 3 shattered vials tranquilizers, the kind we use for large animals. "They left most of it," he said, "but enough's missing to make trouble. If they dose a calf or horse and it dies, they can claim you're mishandling stock." Emily folded her arms. "And if they plant it on our property, it looks like we're running an unlicensed drug stash." Patterson's jaw worked. "I'll get the lab on this, but the smear is the point. She wants that doubt hanging in the air when you walk into court." By 9:00, Garrett was pacing outside the courthouse steps, phone pressed to his ear. "We spin it," he said when he hung up. "We bring it up before they do. Frame it as the harassment it is. Show the judge the video. What if she has more?" I asked. He gave a humorless smile. "Then she's about to choke on it. Inside." The courtroom smelled faintly of lemon polish and nerves. Meredith sat at the defendant's table in a tailored navy suit, hair smoothed into perfect compliance. She didn't look at me. She looked at the judge like they were old friends. The first hour was procedure, but the temperature shifted when Garrett played the clip of the ambulance blocked at the gate. You could feel the air tighten. Even the court reporter's fingers slowed. Meredith's lawyer countered with a slideshow of code violations on my property. Grainy photos of rusted gates taken from the wrong angle. A shot of the pond labeled untreated runoff hazard. I recognized last night's fake sign in one of the frames. Garrett rose slowly. Your Honor, those images come from unlawful entry and staged conditions. I have time-stamped security footage of their creation. The judge leaned forward. We'll see it. We played the North Pasture clip. Meredith's lawyer objected, but the judge waved him down. When the screen froze on the counterfeit county seal, you could hear a pin drop. Balak, see you at recess. I stepped into the hallway for air. Meredith's voice came from behind me, low enough to avoid the reporters clustered by the door. You've made enemies in places you don't even see. Carver, this case won't save you. I turned. You said that before. Remember? But here I am, and here you are sliding downhill. Her eyes narrowed. You think you've got the high ground, but you don't know who's standing behind me. I smiled without humor. If they're anything like the people in front of you, I'm not worried. She didn't answer, just walked away, heels clicking like a metronome for her own countdown. Back in the courtroom, Garrett dropped his ace the email chain with KL Holdings, complete with Meredith's bullet point plan to phase out Carver operations. The judge read it twice, jaw tightening. Given the evidence, he said finally, the court grants the injunction. The defendant is prohibited from any interference with the Carver easement, property, or business operations until resolution of the civil matter. A wave of relief hit me, but it lasted about 3 seconds. Because as the gavel fell, a bailiff leaned toward Patterson and murmured something that made the sheriff's face go still. Patterson looked at me. We need to talk. Now. We stepped into the hallway, away from the reporters. Patterson's voice was low but edged with urgency. Deputy just got a call from County Animal Control. An anonymous tip claims one of your pastures is full of dead cattle. They're sending a team right now. Emily's face went pale. Dead cattle. We checked the herd this morning. They were fine. That's the point, Patterson said. Somebody wants photos on the news before you can prove otherwise. I didn't have to guess who somebody was. We drove fast, Patterson in the lead, lights flashing. When we crested the last hill before the ranch, I saw them 3 county trucks, hazard flashers strobing, cameras already clicking, and in the middle of the lower pasture lay 4 of my steers, unmoving. Emily ran ahead, kneeling beside the nearest. Sedated, she called back, respirations slow. But they're alive. Patterson crouched, sniffing the animal's muzzle. Smells like the same tranquilizer from your clinic break-in. One of the county officers approached me. Mr. Carver, we have to document this as an active investigation into possible animal cruelty. You'll document, I said, but you'll also record this. I pointed to the trail cam bolted to the fence post. It's been rolling since last night. We pulled the footage on site. At 5:17 a.m., headlights swept the pasture. 2 figures in hoodies climbed the fence, each carrying a syringe case. The camera caught them working quickly, moving from animal to animal, then leaving toward Cedar Hollow. The officer's jaw tightened. We'll need to impound that video for evidence. Make copies, Patterson said. We're not losing our only proof. But by noon, the sedated steers were standing again, groggy but alive. Emily stayed with them while I met Garrett on the porch. This is escalation into criminal territory, he said. Tampering with livestock is a felony. And with the video, we can tie it to her operation. I looked toward the subdivision, the rooftops just visible over the ridge. She's trying to crush us before the injunction even cools. Garrett shook his head. No. She's trying to provoke you into a move she can spin as retaliation. She's not getting it, I said. But she is going to get something else. That night, we hosted an impromptu meeting in the barn. Neighbors, fellow ranchers, even a few Cedar Hollow residents who'd had enough of Meredith's rule. Nora was there too, with a stack of printed emails showing Meredith's compliance ladder plan. We take this public, I told them. Every news outlet, every ag association, every HOA reform group in the state. No more playing defense. Patterson nodded. And I'll push for warrants on her cousin's business accounts. If we can prove the financial trail, it's game over. Nora raised her hand. She's not going to just wait for court. She'll come at you one more time. Hard. I knew she was right. Meredith wouldn't leave this unfinished. And the message came at 2:04 a.m., a single text from another blocked number. Enjoy your pond while it lasts. The trail cam pinged less than a minute later. On the screen, 3 dark shapes moved toward the dam, hauling what looked like fuel cans. I was already reaching for my coat. She's making her last play. Emily grabbed her phone. So are we. We hit the north pasture in under 4 minutes. Patterson's cruiser skidding in behind us. The dam loomed ahead, its silhouette jagged under a waning moon. 3 figures crouched at the base, splashing liquid from red fuel cans onto the timbers. One of them, the tallest, lit a match. Sheriff's office. Drop it. Patterson's voice cracked the night like a rifle shot. The match froze midair, then fizzled in the wind. 2 of them bolted for the trees. Patterson's deputy tackled the shorter one before he cleared the bank. The tall one turned, and even in the dark, I knew that stance. Meredith, I shouted. She didn't run. She just stared at me, eyes sharp, jaw set, like she wanted me to see her here. Then the deputy's flashlight beam pinned her, and the spell broke. She dropped the can and stepped back, hands up. Attempted arson on agricultural property. Patterson said flatly as he cuffed her. You've outdone yourself. Her only reply was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though inala sorry by dawn, the pond was safe, the dam unscathed. News spread fast. Patterson had leaked the arrest to the county paper before Meredith's lawyer could spin it. Headlines hit by breakfast. HOA President arrested in ranch arson attempt. Garrett arrived mid-morning with the kind of grin he usually saved for closing arguments. They'll try to make bail, but between the arson charge, the livestock tampering, and the phone records, she's radioactive, and her cousin's shell company, already under financial seizure. Emily leaned against the porch rail, exhaustion and relief warring on her face. So this is over. Garrett's grin softened. For her, maybe. But the civil case still runs its course. And we're making sure this sets a precedent. 2 weeks later, the courthouse was packed for the settlement hearing. The judge wasted no time. Given the overwhelming evidence of harassment, fraud, and criminal misconduct, the court orders the defendant and associated entities to pay the Carver family $325,000 in damages, plus full legal fees. Additionally, the Cedar Hollow HOA is barred from any jurisdiction over the Carver property. The gavel hit like a thunderclap. Applause erupted from the back row neighbors, ranchers, even a few former HOA members. Meredith wasn't there to hear it. She was sitting in county lockup, awaiting trial on her criminal charges. The spring came early that year. The frost lifted from Raven's path, and the road felt different under my boots lighter, like it knew it was safe again. Emily's clinic was busier than ever, with new clients driving from towns we'd never served before. The story had traveled, and so had the trust. On the first Saturday in April, we hosted a ranch open day. Kids fed calves, neighbors toured the pasture, and Emily grilled burgers while Patterson told the ambulance at the gate story for the 100th time. Nora arrived late, carrying a photo album. Inside were shots of her family's old place in Cedar Hollow, before the fines and the pressure drove them out. "You got her," she said, smiling for the first time since I'd met her, for all of us. I closed the album gently. We all got her, and we'll keep getting people like her. Because that was the thing about Meredith's brand of power, it worked in the shadows, behind closed doors and HOA rules nobody questioned, until someone dragged it out into the sun. Now. The sun was on Raven's path, and it wasn't going anywhere. Of that night, as the last guests left, Emily and I walked the road to the gate. The smart cameras blinked softly in the dark, recording nothing more dangerous than a deer slipping through the grass. "Think we'll ever see her again?" Emily asked. "Not here," I said. "And if she tries, the whole county will be waiting." I looked out over the land, our land lit by the first stars. The fight had been long, bitter, and personal. But we'd won without bending, without breaking, and that, more than any dollar amount or court ruling, was the real victory.